Emazing Lights, the biggest company in LED gloving, announced this week that they are closing up shop. They were a force to be reckoned with in the gloving world. They appeared on Shark Tank, and yes, even tried their hands at the LED poi market. So how do you go from a $15 million valuation to shutting down? Well, I honestly don't have all of the answers, but I'll try to offer up some of them here. Drex here from Drex Factor Poi, sharing with you the love of poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain. And in this video, we're going to talk about the rise and fall of one of the most dynamic and controversial companies in the flow arts. But before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Fire Mecca, Flow Fests, Flow Toys, Juggling Calling, Pyroterra Light Toys, and Ultrapoi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all of these amazing companies and the work that they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links that I have down in the description of this video. And special thanks to the non-business friends of the channel, Lain Mochinsky and Pekha Pekkonen. Thank you so very much for supporting my channel, my work, and my mission. On Monday, January 9th, Emazing Lights made an announcement via Instagram, Facebook, and on their email list that rocked the gloving world. After more than a decade of operations, the company's website was shutting down. Sales for remaining stock were going to be done through sister site iHeartRaves, but the message was clear. This was the end of the road. Emazing Lights was arguably the biggest and most famous brand in the flow arts, so its shutting down is not a small matter. But how did it get so big, and why would it shut down? That's a very, very big and complicated question, but I'm going to try and provide some answers today. I won't pretend that they will be complete or even comprehensive, but this is how I see how we got here. To start with, if we're going to talk about Emazing Lights, we really have to talk about its CEO, Brian Lim. Lim got started in gloving and LED props when he tried out his first set of gloves back in 2010. Believing himself to be a poor dancer, but surprised he could still draw a crowd when using the gloves, he saw the potential for starting a business around them and began selling sets out of his trunk at a variety of events in Southern California. Before long, he'd quit his day job at Deloitte and was selling LED gloves full-time. He opened up a storefront selling the gloves and hosting small competitions before working up to a full e-commerce business run out of a warehouse in Anaheim, California. And Emazing Lights got big. Really big. Not only were they pulling in millions of dollars in revenue every year, the company and Brian Lim himself were getting written up in both the local press as well as bigger publications like Inc. magazine and Rolling Stone. And if you've heard of either Brian Lim or Emazing Lights, it's pretty certain it's because of a certain reality TV show called Shark Tank. In 2015, Brian Lim appeared on the show and wowed judges Mark Cuban and Damon John enough to get investment valuing his company at $13 million. The last valuation I saw for the company put its market cap at $15 million. For any company in the flow arts, that is an incredible feat. But this meteoric success did not come without controversy or adversity. One of the biggest shocks the company faced came very near the beginning of it when gloving was banned by the biggest rave event production company in the country, Insomniac Events. Raves and EDM events were kind of the bread and butter for the gloving community. There was a symbiotic relationship between the music and culture around them and gloving itself, so this was a pretty huge blow. Why the ban? Officially, two reasons were given. One that I think is kind of ridiculous, and one that I actually don't. The first is that event promoters believed there was a relationship between gloving and illicit drug use. Whether it was people tripping out as glovers performed for them, or people smuggling drugs into events in their gloves themselves, promoters singled gloving out as having unique associations in this matter and banned it from their events. Which, I have to say, in terms of associations with drug culture at a rave, it's a rave. I honestly think it's kind of weird to make gloving a scapegoat here. The second actually does kind of make sense to me though. The reasoning goes something like this. From what I've seen, most gloving light shows happen with both the performer and the person they're performing for sitting down. I've heard of a lot of people mention them being associated with cuddle puddles and the like. And on the surface of it, there's nothing wrong with that. All performance arts have their specific contexts and manner in which they are performed. But when you've got a dozen people down on the floor during an event that has hundreds or even thousands of attendees, it can create problems for crowd flow, or worse, become a hazard if there's a stampede or a fire. I've been in a crowd stampede before, and I can tell you, without a doubt, that if anybody had been sitting either in the middle or edge of that crowd, they would have gotten badly hurt and likely would have caused a lot of other injuries to people tripping over them and getting trampled as well. Don't get me wrong, it sucks. but it also does make sense from the perspective of an event producer. While that was an event that had a negative impact on the entire industry, there were also events that more specifically made Emazing Lights a controversial company within it. In 2015, a former employee started up a Kickstarter campaign to fund development of an open-source microlight or OSM chip to make available to anyone who wanted to reprogram it. The Kickstarter was a success, but Discord soon followed as Emazing Lights claimed that the employee had stolen trade secrets from them, and worse, the open-source chip ran afoul of a patent that they owned. The subsequent lawsuit not only created sharp division and conflicts in the gloving community, it also pulled in several other LED glove retailers who were selling the OSMs into the crossfire of this situation as well. Now, I am not a patent attorney, electric engineer, or software engineer, so I am in no position to comment on the validity of the claim, but I can tell you that in the end, the former employee settled, and it left deep divisions in the gloving community that remain even to this day. And probably the example that's most relevant to my audience would have to do with the company's pivots into other flow arts. While the company's forays into developing orbits was relatively uncontroversial, the same cannot be said of its attempts to develop its own set of LED poi. The company sought to bring more types of flow artists into its fold by developing its own set of LED poi and putting a colorful marketing campaign behind them. Only it didn't quite go as planned. When Emazing Lights first released its ePoi in 2016, people couldn't help but notice that the poi looked really similar to Pod Poi from Flow Toys, from the form factor to the design of the bag that they came in. To add to that, the company created a colorful marketing video that took footage from many prominent poi spinners without asking their permission. It really did not look good for the company. A lot of flow arts culture has counterculture roots, and as such, there's kind of a distrust both for authority as well as anything deemed corporate or for-profit. Lots of companies in the flow arts have to thread a pretty delicate needle of working towards success, while at the same time appearing humble and community-driven. Emazing Lights sure looked a lot like the faceless corporate overlords that flow artists harbored no shortage of anxieties around. And honestly, on this point, I do actually have some sympathy for the company. They made some pretty big mistakes, but I can also understand why they made them. Thing is, in gloving you're dealing with lights inside of gloves. There's not a whole lot of room to create distinctive form factors. The bulk of the innovation and intellectual property goes into the chips themselves and how they're programmed. So when that's the world you're coming from and you're working to develop a set of poi, I can absolutely see how you'd come at it by creating a really similar form factor and then focusing your attentions on the programming for the chips and lights inside of that form factor. Bear in mind, this is me giving the benefit of the doubt. I have no idea what the process looked like on the inside. Either way, they might have stepped into something that they might not have known was going to be a sensitive issue. Can I see a way that that could have been done without malice? Yes. If my charitable interpretation is right, though, should they still have done their homework better and been more aware of how these practices would be received outside of the gloving world? Also, yes. So clearly, over the course of the past decade, the company has been navigating some ups and downs. But what ultimately caused them to close up shop? Did their reputation take one hit too many and they couldn't recover from it? Honestly, no, I don't think so. If there's one thing that's been made clear in the wake of the announcement, it's that this company meant quite a lot to a lot of people. Even people who had been outspoken critics of the company clearly respected it on some level, with one commenter comparing Emazing Lights to the Nike of the gloving world. So did the controversies sink the ship here? No, they clearly still had no shortage of community support. So what did? Well, I am no expert and I have never worked for the company, but from where I'm sitting, there are three key issues that I think are important to put into the conversation. The first we already looked at a bit. It's mentioned in the farewell message as well as something I noted earlier in this video. The gloving ban at raves had a cataclysmic effect on the gloving market and the growth of the community in general. Again, I think that there's a symbiotic relationship between gloving and the rave scene, and gloving really wasn't a part of what I think was the biggest boom in EDM events as a business. With raves as a key way to expose new people and onboard them into the art, it was always going to be hard to pull in new glovers through other means. That didn't stop them from trying, though. Emazing Lights did pivot into hosting and sponsoring competitions, founding the International Gloving Competition, or IGC, in 2011, the year after gloving was banned. I actually went to one of these events myself, and I'll confess that it was actually a cool and unique vibe. Dozens, if not hundreds, of glovers and orbiters sharing and competing over the course of 2 days in an esports arena in Anaheim. And the year after I went, they pivoted into doing the event completely online. I can't help but think that was a sign that perhaps they weren't getting as much engagement through the competitions as they'd hoped for and were switching to a model that had less overhead costs. In other words, competitions as a replacement for participation in EDM events in the end might not have had the impact that they were hoping for. Second, we have to talk about COVID. I think it'll be years before we're fully aware of just how huge an impact the COVID-19 pandemic had on a variety of different businesses. But one thing that I can tell you for sure is that it had a catastrophic impact on two things that I think were really important to Emazing Lights: live events and chip supply chains. The lack of live events was a factor cited by the company itself in its statement. It's hard to bring new people into the gloving world if they're not being exposed to it, and it can be hard to do that without competitions and smaller events in which people might see gloving for the first time. But that wasn't the only industry impacted by the pandemic. Supply chains have been absolutely devastated for the past 2 years, and one of the biggest shortages worldwide is in computer chips and integrated circuits. I know of several other flow arts companies that have been set back in releasing new products, or even being able to keep old ones in stock as a result of the shocks. I had a hunch that this was a contributing factor to the shutdown, so I actually wrote an email to Emazing Lights CEO Brian Lim, and he confirmed for me that it indeed had been a challenge for the company. Okay, so what's the final factor in Emazing Lights shutting down? Well, honestly, it's that I think a lot of us are actually looking at this in the wrong way. So I'll confess that I was a little surprised by the announcement, but not all that surprised. Here's why. Purely coincidentally, I got on the Emazing Lights website a few months ago, and I noticed something that I thought was really peculiar. Most of the product listings on the site were gone. This is a website that once hosted not just Emazing Lights products, but also products from several other companies as well. But this was not true of their sister sites. Amid the rapid growth of Emazing Lights, the company expanded into rave apparel as a business, growing into the Emazing Group with iHeart Raves and the acquisition of Into the AM. The websites for each of these brands appear to be alive and well, and it appears the remaining products for Emazing Lights are actually going to be moved to iHeart Raves. They'll also still be available on Amazon, but that's not relevant to where I'm going with this. Gloving is banned at raves and has limited reach outside of them. You know it isn't banned at raves and still has a massive reach? Clothes. Pivoting into apparel was always a good move because it meant staying within a demographic the company already understood, but without having to work around the restrictions that gloving was facing. The barrier to entry is incredibly low, and even non-ravers will sometimes buy the colorful clothes associated with it. They got into selling not just LED props, but a whole lifestyle around it. And those brands aren't going anywhere. I don't think we should be looking at this as a $15 million company that collapsed, but as a company that's likely still healthy, merely shutting down its riskiest and least profitable division to focus on the parts of the business that are working. It takes a lot of research and testing to launch new electronics products. It's tough and it takes a lot of time and effort, and in some cases, it's also just not worth it. I know it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow, but in the end, it may just be that while gloving was what got the business started, it ultimately wasn't what was going to keep it going. Or at least, not at the level that the people running it were looking for. But just on a personal note, I do think it's important to mark events like this. Regardless of how you feel about Emazing Lights and its products or the people who run it, this is a company that was featured in the national press and on television. It's a company that people outside of the flow arts were not unlikely to have heard of. Having a company like that out in the world that can expose more people to what we do and shows that there's a massive amount of value in it, I think is a good thing. I am a little sad to see the company go, and I hope for the best for the people who work there. And I also hope that other companies that either exist now or in the future continue to raise the profile of the flow arts, because what we do is cool, and I think more people ought to know about it. But for today, RIP Emazing Lights, and thanks for all the times, good and bad. So what do you think? Why did Emazing Lights ultimately shut down? I did a lot of research for this video, and honestly, most of it didn't make it in. There are things that I missed deliberately in order to keep the scope of this video more focused, and there are likely things that I never knew about. Sound off in the comments and tell me, why do you think Emazing Lights shut down? Did you get anything out of this video? Please leave me a like, comment, share, and subscribe to keep the conversation going, to help other people find it, and to help my channel grow. This video would not be possible if not for the wonderful support of all of these amazing people right here. These are my Flow patrons over on Patreon, and they, along with the people listed down in the description, help to make this video and all the videos on my channel possible. Thank you one and all for your very generous support. Do you like my videos? Do you like my flow sessions, vlogs, reviews, combos, and more? I'm on a mission to bring poi spinning and flow arts to the wider world and help people connect with their brains and their bodies. So help me do it. Head on over to patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and sign up. You can do that at the link in the description or the card that just popped up if you are watching on YouTube. There you can get access to a whole host of awesome rewards and help me along in my mission. Do check that out, please, and thank you. This is not the first time I've done a video charting the rise and fall of a company in the flow arts. To check out some of my other videos on flow arts, economics, and culture, I will leave a link to a playlist of videos on that topic down in the description, as well as up on screen if you are watching on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching, and make sure to get outside and flow today. I'll see you with a brand new video real soon. Peace.